Mika Zibanejad complains about playing time and then completely disappears in a 5-3 loss to the Capitals.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1172 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. So I want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Rangers drop a tough game in Washington. They lose 5-3. It was really, you could call it a 4-3 loss in some ways. But whether you want to go with 4-3 to account for the empty netter or call it a 5-3 loss, which is what it, of course, literally was, I think it's a minor miracle that the Rangers were even as close as they were at the end of this game. They just didn't play well. They got outworked, out-hustled, and just outplayed in just about every facet of the game. And in our last episode, the one before this one, we did like a mini call out of the Mika Zibanejad line. I mean, I don't think I went overboard or anything like that, but I was completely prepared to move on, talk about some different things after this game ended, whether the Rangers won or lost or whatever happened. But there was a story that dropped from Larry Brooks with the New York Post before this game here with some very eyebrow-raising quotes from Mika Zibanejad. Essentially, he didn't like the fact that his playing time had been reduced and basically said as much in this article. And then once the puck dropped for this game, once the game began, we get a high-pace, physical, high-energy game, an emotional game, a chippy game, and Mika Zibanejad is, for the most part, nowhere to be found. I mean, a couple decent shifts here and there, and of course, he did have the primary assist on the Chris Kreider power play goal, if we're being completely fair here, but for the most part, this is basically a no-show from Mika Zibanejad. And also, in fairness to Mika, it was a no-show for a lot of players on the Rangers, basically every defenseman. I would say the entire top six. And I mean, the fourth line, I guess, was okay, but you're not really expecting them to contribute offensively. The only players on the Rangers that really brought it in this game was the Filipino line. We're going to give them their props a little bit later in this episode. But that actually leads me to another point that I want to make here. The Mika Zibanejad line, once again, completely outshined by the Filipino line, and Mika Zibanejad himself completely outshined by Filipino himself. And as far as, Mika's stats in this game, and I mean, these honestly aren't even that important relative to what we're talking about here, but we might as well just go through them real quick here. One assist, we talked about that a minute ago. He did have the primary on the Kreider tip-in goal on the power play. He was also a -3, one shot on goal in 16 minutes and 36 seconds of ice time. So that's not great to begin with. And when you watch this game, it honestly was probably a little bit worse than that. We're going to go ahead and break down what Mika Zibanejad said before this game that kind of got everybody talking at least a little bit. We'll do that a little bit later. But the first thing I wanted to do was just highlight a couple of plays that Mika Zibanejad made, or I guess didn't make, in this game. And we're not going to spend too much time. I'm not going to go through every single shift that Mika Zibanejad had on this night, but there were two plays that, for me, really stood out quite a bit. And both of them were actually in the second period. And there's other things you can look at too. But these were the two that, to me, they just kind of suggest he doesn't have it right now. And he's clearly not at his best right now. And we're obviously hopeful that there are better days ahead. But there was this play to begin with in the second period here. Mika Zibanejad, during a long power play for the Rangers. He had a power play for the Rangers. Then the Capitals took, I almost said the Canucks. I don't know why. Probably that Game 7 documentary I watched the other day. But anyway, the Capitals, they take another penalty. So the Rangers have a 5-on-3 for, I want to say, about 30 seconds. And then that ended, and the Rangers go back to a normal 5-on-4 power play. But there was a sequence here, once it got back to 5-on-4, where the Rangers were teeing up Mika Zibanejad for one-timers. And on one hand, I don't like when the Rangers over-rely on the Mika Zibanejad one-timer on the power play. But on the other hand, I really want this guy to get going, and that's obviously something that he brings to the table, a dangerous one-timer. So let's go ahead and let's feed Mika, and let's try to get it going here. But 3 straight attempts at a one-timer for Mika Zibanejad. The first one, he must have missed the net by at least 5 feet. It just wasn't even anywhere in the same zip code as the net. The second one, I thought he got off a pretty good shot on this one, a pretty solid one-timer, but the goalie was able to, move to his right and make the save. And then the third one, he gets another chance at a one-timer, and this time he just completely shanks it. So there was that sequence on the power play, and then this happened a little bit later in the second period. At this point, even strength for both teams. Mika goes up the center of the ice on a rush. It's 2-on-2, so it's not like a phenomenal scoring chance, but you've got Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider, two of your better players, two of your three forwards on your top line. So you're hopeful as this play is developing that maybe they can make something happen. So Mika goes right up the center of the ice, but then he just kind of veers off to the right, goes to, the outside over along the boards there. And the defenseman stays with him all the way. It was Trevor Van Riemsdyk. And then Mika, he's got the defenseman on him. He's completely out of room. He hasn't gone to the high danger scoring areas here. He's along the boards, and he kind of just half-heartedly tries to pass across the ice to Kreider. Van Riemsdyk tips it. It goes up into the netting and out of play. And this play is not like some spectacular disaster or anything like that. You're not going to see it on a lot of highlight reels. But to me, a play like this just kind of embodies what's going on with Mika Zibanejad right now. You're 2-on-2, and you're matched up 1-on-1 against Trevor Van Riemsdyk. Now, Van Riemsdyk, he's a solid veteran defenseman, not a bad player at all, but I don't have him picked to win the Norris this year. I don't think you guys do either. How about instead of just willingly, veering off to the side and essentially taking yourself out of the play, how about challenge him? Make a move. Try to power your way through him. Do something. Maybe crisscross with Kreider on the way in. Mika and Kreider have been playing forever. You just would think that they would come up with something a little bit better than this and create maybe not like, you don't necessarily have to score here, but give me something. Give me like a reason to believe that it looks like you're about to score and that you want to score. And I just didn't see it on this play. So just two plays. Again, not going to go through the entire game shift by shift for Mika Zibanejad, but those two plays to me kind of just sum up right now the way it's going with Mika Zibanejad. And there's something else going on with Mika that I think really hurts him in the eyes of the fans. And on one hand, talk is cheap. And when these players are doing interviews with the media, a lot of times I think, and I understand this, they kind of just want to get it over with and just say a couple of generic hockey cliches and then move on with their lives. And I can understand that because when you do it 82 times a year for multiple years, plus however many playoff games, it probably does get old at a certain point. But couple of quotes. We'll get to the quotes that he made before this game in just a second, but I want to go back actually to last year in the playoffs. And keep in mind, this is coming from somebody that's been a pretty big Mika Zibanejad defender over the years. But, it's the playoffs. It's the Eastern Conference Final against the Florida Panthers. Obviously a fantastic team. But Mika was asked about, his line's relative lack of offensive production. Not an unfair question. I don't remember if this was like toward the end of this series or if it was after the series ended, but that doesn't really matter here. Mika Zibanejad, when he was asked about this, basically said, well, it's been tough and our line and their line have just kind of canceled each other out. Now, he's not wrong about that. And I said a very similar thing on this podcast before Mika Zibanejad ever said it. But the difference is I'm sitting here looking into a laptop screen, talking to you guys about what I'm seeing in the game. Mika Zibanejad is an alternate captain and the second highest paid forward on the New York Rangers. Somebody that's supposed to be leading the way and let's go get it. He can't be satisfied with just canceling out with Florida's top line. And again, there was some truth to that because even though the Ranger top players weren't scoring early in that series, the same can be said for the Florida Panthers top players. They were very quiet early in that series as well. But you can't just be happy with a stalemate. What, you just got to cancel each other out and leave the scoring up to Matt Rempe and Jimmy Vesey and Ryan Lindgren? Like, come on, man. You got to give me a little bit more than that. There was also a quote after the season. Mika was asked on what type of a right-wing player would be ideal for him on his line with obviously himself and Chris Kreider. And he waited forever. Like he said, that's a good question. And you put me on the spot. And then he waited forever to answer. It almost got a little bit uncomfortable. And then he kind of just, goes on this, I don't want to say rant, but it was just kind of this vague idea of like what kind of player he'd like to play with. How about saying, you know what? We've got a lot of great right wingers on this team. We got a lot of great players on this team, or maybe somebody else will come in here, but whoever I'm with, it's my job as one of the leaders of this team to make it work. Whether it's, a young guy, an old guy, a guy that's kind of a grinded out type player, a guy that's a little bit more of a finesse player, whatever it might be, it's my job to make it work. He just never says anything like that. And I think if he did say something like that, fans would, have his back a little bit more than they currently do. Because when you go on social media right now and you see what the fans are saying about Mika Zibanejad, it's ugly. And some of it does cross the line. But if you're critiquing his game based on what you saw last night, I think that's fair game, especially when Mika Zibanejad, like I said, is supposed to be one of the leaders on this team. And then, of course, we had the quotes that came out before this game in the Larry Brooks article. And I'll read a couple of them here and just kind of share my thoughts on it. He was asked basically about his ice time being reduced in recent games. And this is what he had to say. You can feel it on the bench. I was averaging 20-plus minutes a few years ago, and I felt really good with that because you could find a better rhythm. Missing those extra 2 or 3 minutes, whatever it might be, you can try and create and feel like it's going to come, but it is what it is. Well, the thing is here, there's a lot of Rangers that are playing very well to start the season, not the least of which is the Filipino line, and a line that clearly has done everything possible to force Laviolette's hand and force its way onto the ice and earn more ice time, which is exactly what they've done, and that's reflecting in the box scores after these games. You're seeing that line, basically on par with the Mika line as far as how much time per night that they're getting. The Filipino line is scoring at a clip. This is before the Capitals game, but they were scoring at a clip, and it's only gone up. This number has only gone up. The Filipino line has scored at a clip of 6.03 goals per 60 minutes, while the Mika line has scored at 2.52 goals per 60 minutes. So, Mika, you got to earn the ice time. I don't want to go too far here, but I feel like that's more than fair for me to say that. The Filipino line, in every possible measurement, has outperformed the Mika Zibanejad line this year. And then Mika was, talking a little bit more about the whole situation here and, gelling with Smith and Kreider and everything. And this is what he had to say. We are trying to do the right thing. We are also getting more D-zone draws, and it's a little harder trying to score at 180 feet. So there are different aspects to it. I think it's been a decent start, and it's getting better. We all want it to work. Okay, again, he's not wrong about any of this. But the way this comes off to fans is not good, because I know it's not what he's doing, but it feels like he's making an excuse here. That's what it feels like. That's what the perception is. And if you just say, instead of this, if you just say we have to be better, I think the fans will get your back more and they'll respect you more for that. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. You just have some accountability and say that, we have to be a little bit better in situations like this. I'm actually going to continue talking about Mika Zibanejad in just a second, because I have a couple other points that I want to make on this entire situation. And then we're also going to get to the Rangers making some in-game defenseman swaps, basically. The D pairings were mixed up toward the end of this game, and it was probably warranted based on how the Rangers defended in this game. So we'll do all that fun stuff, or not so fun stuff in some cases, in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know. Thank everybody, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. Once again, we are free and available on all platforms. And in our next episode, very much looking forward to this. We're going to be doing a crossover with Locked On Senators. Always a good time talking some hockey with those guys. And, of course, that will be the Rangers' next matchup, Rangers versus Senators. But for right now, let's keep the focus on this game. And more specifically, I wanted to say a couple more things about Mika Zibanejad here, because I am pulling for Mika Zibanejad. I want to see him come out of this. I want to see him kind of win back over some of the Ranger fans that have been a little bit tough on him to start the season here, myself included. But there is one other thing here that I think is kind of working against Mika Zibanejad, and this one isn't 100% his fault, but it's the fact that the Filipino line has played so well, and Filipino himself has played so well, that there's kind of a comparison that I think Ranger fans, even subconsciously, are making between those two players. And when you look at the situation that both these two players are in, first of all, you've got Mika Zibanejad, who is one of your alternate captains, the second longest tenured player on the team, somebody that's supposed to lead the way for this team, both, from a leadership standpoint and a production standpoint on the ice. You've got that. And then you've got Filipino, who's still a very young player, a homegrown player, a guy that, fans really seem to take a liking to, even before, he's gone through some adversity here. Everybody loved the kid line, right? But then he goes through all these concussions. He misses basically all of last season. He played 10 regular season games, missed the entire rest of the regular season, got back in there for some playoff games. But now you look at this year, every single game, this guy is bringing it. He's one of the most engaged, the most dangerous looking, the most just ready to go players on the New York Rangers right now. And you look at Mika Zibanejad, and it feels like he's not going full bore the way that he's capable of doing. It doesn't help when you also look at the salary discrepancy, because you're always, and it's nobody's fault. We all do this, but you're always kind of looking at what a player is doing relative to his salary. Mika Zibanejad makes $8.5 million per season. Filipino makes $4.4 million per season. And Filipino right now is skating circles around Mika Zibanejad. And I realize Mika on certain nights is going to have tougher matchups than Filipino, first line versus third line. That's kind of just a byproduct of that dynamic. But man, I mean, Filipino right now, he's everybody's hero. Ranger fans, from time to time, we're all going to get on this player or get on that player. Nobody's going to say anything bad about Filipino right now. First of all, he's playing awesome. And secondly, he went through all that adversity, battled to get back. We thought maybe his career was over. When he fell down on the ice, they were having that, open skate. It was only him and Zach Jones and Jake Lecision out there, and he collapses and has to be helped off the ice. I mean, tell me you weren't thinking in your head, at least to a degree, that, my God, that might be it for Filipino. And now he's back and he's excelling. And the other Rangers center, the guy that's supposed to be, one of the absolute best players on the team, just isn't playing that way. So that doesn't help Mika Zibanejad either. And one more thing that I'll say about this whole situation is that, contrary to what a lot of people think, I do believe that Ranger fans and New York fans in general, they are tough, but they are fair. And there's two things that New York sports fans really, really want to see out of their pro athletes when things aren't going well. First of all, effort. You need to bust your tail every single game, no matter what the sport is, no matter what the situation is, no matter what the standings are, regular season, postseason, it doesn't matter. New York sports fans, I think above all else, want to see big time, just passionate effort from this player or that player, whoever it might be. They also want to see accountability when things are going bad. When you're not playing well, when the team is in a funk, they want to see you stand up and say, you know what, this isn't good enough. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to be better. I'm going to find a way. Mika Zibanejad, you're not getting that from him. You're just not. And I want to see it from him because, again, it goes back to something I said a couple of minutes ago. He can really help his own cause if he does those things. If we can truly honest effort from him on a night in and night out basis, and if we can see him, kind of admitting when and just kind of being like, hey, it'll get better. We'll fix it. We'll pick it up. I'm going to be the one leading the way kind of a thing. And we just don't really get that, or haven't at least yet, from Mika Zibanejad. So, again, tough but fair. That's what New York sports fans are, and I like to think that that's kind of what I was just a minute ago there. Tough but fair on Mika Zibanejad, because I love Mika Zibanejad, man. He's one of my favorite players. I want to see him pick it up. I want to see him getting going. And for all the not so good things this year, there's good things too. A good amount of points, big time role on the power play and on the penalty kill. Caps were 0 for 4 on the penalty kill last night. Caps were 0 for 4 on the power play. Mika has a hand in that as well, but they need more from Mika Zibanejad, and it's got to start sooner rather than later, especially after he said what he said before the game against the Capitals. I want to shift our attention now, though, to another storyline coming out of this game, and that would be just bad defense in general by the Rangers, specifically the defensemen. This was not going to go in the career highlight reels for basically any of the Ranger defensemen, I don't think. So there's that, and also the fact that Peter Laviolette switched to defense pairings in the third period, which was understandable given what happened. In general, this is going to be an interesting storyline to watch because really ever since this podcast has existed, and you can go back even farther than that, the Ranger defensemen, I mean, we've seen some defensemen come and go, right? But for the most part, you're looking at a situation over the past 5 years or however long you want to go back, where the defense pairings were basically the same thing night in and night out. Lindgren and Fox, Miller and Trouba. And then the third pairing, there's been some, some guys that have come and gone there for sure. But usually for a single season, it's pretty set in stone. And it's been very fluid recently. The only pairing that we've seen with any consistency this year has been Fox and Miller. And I'm not so sure they're going to get another game together because they were bad in this game. Keandre Miller, I would say especially. It wasn't a great night for Adam Fox either, though. Peter Laviolette pretty much said as much after the game. I thought Braden Schneider had a tough game in this one, took himself out of the play on a couple of different occasions. I do think some changes might be coming, and some permanent changes. And it's different from what we saw against the Panthers, because in that game, we saw the Rangers shuffle the deck a little bit. They didn't really make that many changes with their forwards, but they had Panarin and Smith basically flip-flop, and they switched that up a little bit. This one, though, they put Fox back with Lindgren at the end of the game. They put Miller back with Trouba, and they had Schneider and Mancini out there together. And this one feels like it might be what they do going forward, because I think Peter Laviolette was probably that dissatisfied with the Rangers' defensive effort and with the play of the defensemen in general. The only thing I don't like about that alignment, the one that I mentioned that, they'll presumably go back to, once again, Lindgren, Fox, Miller, Trouba, and Schneider, Mancini. The only thing I don't like is that it does relegate Braden Schneider to a third, pairing. So I don't love that because he's better than that. But by that same token, this is probably the best combination you can go with. Lindgren and Fox, they're both kind of trying to find it a little bit this season. Fox has been good. It was just the one game. But Miller and Trouba, that's kind of a tried and true situation. Hopefully those two can work together well like they have in the past. They've had their ups and downs as a pairing in the past as well. You also hope that Zach Jones gets in there at some point. But I would go back to the old defense pairings for the next game. I really would. Like I said, this is not a banner night for any of the Ranger defensemen. There were two plays that I got to highlight, both goals that were scored by the Capitals. The McMichael tip-in goal, this one made it 3-1 in favor of the Capitals. And not a good shift here for Braden Schneider. We had him basically taking himself out of the play, going down to block a shot. But even if the guy took the shot from here, he was very unlikely to score. And Schneider went down to the ice. And then there's a pass made across the ice to McMichael for the tip-in goal, and that made it 3-1 in favor of the Capitals. And this was even worse. The goal that made it 4-2, Keandre Miller. Sean Avery had some things to say about this on social media. But basically, puck goes into the corner in the Ranger zone, 50-50 puck, and he's trying to get there before Protas does. They get there around the same time, and Protas does have kind of the inside track. But Miller, you've got a golden opportunity here, man, to just ride this guy into the boards. You're a big guy. You're a strong kid. Go ahead and knock him into the boards and knock him off balance at the very least. Maybe even knock him down to the ice. Miller doesn't do that. I mean, I guess there was a little bit of contact there from Miller and a little bit of a hit, but he could have really delivered a solid hit there. Didn't do it. And then the puck gets moved out of the corner because Protas won this 50-50 puck. And then Protas also beats Miller to the front of the net. Miller's trailing him. The pass goes back to Protas. Protas scores on a tipping goal from the doorstep. A lot of tipping goals, a lot of goals in deep for the Capitals on this in this game, and that doesn't reflect well on the Ranger defensemen. Just not doing enough to get them out of that that area, that high danger scoring area. So, like I said, not a good night for any of the Ranger defensemen, and I'm completely cool with them going with different pairings in the next game if that's what they choose to do. But we're gonna keep everything rolling in just a second here. I want to shift our attention to the Filipino line. The one positive to take out of this game is that line continues to excel. So we will go ahead and do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Your game, run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $50 lineup. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. I want to close out today's episode with some positives here. We like to be glass half full for the most part on Locked On Rangers. I said what I had to say about Mika Zibanejad. I said what I had to say about the defense pairings. But now let's go ahead and give some props to far and away the best part of this game for the Rangers. I think if this is your first hockey game, if you didn't even know what hockey was and somebody just put this on and said, watch this, I think that person would probably be able to figure out that the Filipino line was clearly the best part of this game for the Rangers. Igor Shesterkin had a pretty good night too, despite giving up the 4 goals. He just didn't get a lot of help. The first one, he's probably got to stop. So Igor did okay, but far and away, the best part for this game for the Rangers was the Filipino line. So first of all, let's go back to what's fast become my favorite stat here. I hope it can keep going as long as possible. The Filipino line still has not been on the ice for a goal against thus far this season. The Rangers are now 6-2-1, I believe. So what are we now? 9 games into the season, going to game number 10, and your number 3 line has not given up a goal against. That is awesome. On top of that, Filipino was a +2. Kaapo Kakko was a +1. They were the only 2 Ranger forwards to be pluses at the end of the night here. Cuylle was an even +-. And, a couple of plays to highlight here. First of all, I love that this line is now starting the games and starting periods. I hope this is a trend that continues because We know the Rangers at times can have a lackluster start to a game, have a lackluster start to a period. There's times also where the immediate shift following a goal is not always the Rangers at their best. So if this is going to be the Rangers' go-to line, I'm completely for it. The third line started this game for the Rangers, and it also started the third period. They probably would have started the second period as well, but at that time, the Rangers were about to start a power play. The Capitals took a penalty right at the end of the first period there. I believe it was Sam Carrick that got hooked on his way to the net. So the Rangers had a power play. They had their power play unit out there for the second period. But if this is going to be the norm, if you're going to go with the third line to start every game, start every period, I'm not going to fight that. And I don't think too many Ranger fans out there are going to do that right now either. On the first shift here, tone-setting play, you were hoping from Will Cuylle, absolutely steamrolled Dylan Strome at center ice about 20 seconds into the game. And then, of course, this line, twice in this game, responded very quickly and produced a goal right after the Capitals had scored. And that happened first in the game when the Capitals went up 1-0. So Capitals score, they make it 1-0, goal by Ovechkin. And the Rangers initially go with the Mika Zibanejad line, and it was a fine shift. It wasn't really good, it wasn't really bad, but the Mika line was out there. Puck goes out of play. You're getting a face-off in the neutral zone, but on the Rangers side of the red line. So the third line is out there for this, and just a hard-working goal here. You've got a face-off that is lost. The Capitals do win it back, but Kaapo Kakko was all over this. He looked like he was shot out of a cannon here, pressured the puck, took it away, went into the offensive zone, up the right side, made a great backhand pass to Will Cuylle, and Will Cuylle is able to score from the doorstep there. So a great job. This is also the Rangers' first shot on goal, 4 minutes and 21 seconds into this game. Great response by the Ranger third line there. And then there was another great response from Filip Chytil. And we're cheating a little bit here because this occurred during a 4-on-4, and Filip Chytil was the only member of the Rangers third line on the ice here. It was Schneider, Mancini, Smith, and Chytil for the 4-on-4. But this goal, scored by Filip Chytil here, occurs just 14 seconds after the Capitals had taken a 4-2 lead. So this knocked it back down to 4-3. And it's a great goal. I mean, Filip Chytil's got the puck. He's weaving his way through the neutral zone. He leads Mancini into the attacking zone with a pass over the blue line. And Filip Chytil, again, like he was fired out of a cannon, goes right to the net. Mancini, a perfect pass by Mancini here. I don't know who decided that Victor Mancini has no offensive skills and he's a stay-at-home defenseman, but we have seen nothing but evidence to the contrary from the first rookie game all the way to whatever this was, the 9th game of the regular season here. He can make some things happen, and he made a perfect pass here. It had to be perfect, and it was, and Filip Chytil was there, and he tips it into the net to make it 4-3. So again, give me all of this third line. I know in this case it was just Filip Chytil, but give me this third line on the ice in big spots after a goal. And if we want to go ahead and take a look at time on the ice, I mean, the Kreider-Mika Smith line did end up cumulatively with more ice time than Cuylle, Chytil, and Kakko. But 5v5, it was a lot more balanced because obviously there were a lot of power plays in this game. The Capitals had 4, Rangers had 3. So that ups Mika and Kreider's time on the ice. But when you look at the time on the ice, it's not really a whole lot different right now. We'll start with the Mika line. Kreider had 1648. Mika had 1636. So they're basically, the same. Smith was at 1426. Then you look at the Chytil line, and Cuylle was at 1516. Chytil was at 1555. Kaapo Kakko was at 1405. So, again, they're starting to cut into the Mika line's playing time. And I think it's only fair because they were easily the best line on the ice for this Ranger team here. And the Raider top 6 in general, it's not like this is a great night for, Panarin and Trocheck and Lafreniere. They were fairly invisible in this game too, just didn't play well. But the reason why I go in on the Mika line a little bit more is because we've seen it out of them where there's certain nights where they just don't have it. The Panarin line, I can forgive one bad game. They didn't have it in this game. A couple of turnovers, not as many scoring chances as you'd like to see them get, but that line's been producing all season, so I'll cut them a little bit of a break. Panarin's off to a historic start to the season. Lafreniere has been fantastic. He just signed that extension, and rightfully so. Trocheck's mostly been good. I don't know that he's been as impactful as you'd like to see him be early in the season, but he's been better than a lot of players, at least a decent amount of other players on this team. So I don't think that it's really a fair comparison to make between those two lines, because for the most part, Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere are bringing it every single night. So figure we can pretty much call it there. I mean, a couple other notes here. We did have McElrath versus Rempe in a fight. We thought this might happen. We were wondering if maybe Matt Rempe was going to take on Tom Wilson. They got together during a post-whistle scrum. Nothing really came out of it, though. But yeah, Rempe, 5 seconds into his first shift, he's dropping the gloves with Dylan McElrath. And as we noted in our last episode, there is a history there. The two of them had an absolute brawl in the AHL 2 years ago. And this is more the same here. I'd have to give a little bit of an edge to Dylan McElrath in this one. I think he won the fight, and obviously there was some blood under Matt Rempe's eye. But, hey, he's willing to fight, and good on him for being able to do that. One positive thing that I'll take from this game, in addition to the Chytil line, is that think about what we saw in this game. This was not a banner performance in any way for the New York Rangers. And really, the only Rangers on the ice that really brought it were the Chytil line and Igor Shesterkin to a lesser extent, because he made some big-time saves in this game and obviously got next to no help. But with all that said, it's a close game, and the Capitals are off to a really good start this season. I think they were like 5-2 coming into this game, something like that, and maybe now 6-2 or whatever it is. But the bottom line, they're off to a good start this season. The Rangers played poorly, one of their worst performances of the season. You can make an argument it was their worst performance of the season, outshot by just an astronomical margin. And yet, despite all that, this is a 1-goal game late in the third period. And the only reason it ended up being a 2-goal game was, of course, the empty net goal that the Washington Capitals scored. So even with the Rangers at their worst, or at least close to their worst, and even with them getting next to nothing out of the top 6, still a competitive game. I'm not big on moral victories. I'm not going to overdo it here, but that was the Rangers, the worst we've seen them all season, and they were right there on the road against a tough team in their building, physical game and whatnot. You just hope that there's better days ahead, because overall the performance wasn't good enough, but that is a silver lining that despite the Rangers playing poorly, they still had a chance, and that's an indication, I think, of a good team. So anyway, we'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.